Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at @it'sJessino. Second show of the day. I actually moved the Arsenal women's review to tomorrow so that we could talk about this today, and also because the England match kind of collided with that. And I was like, okay, like let me just move around the schedule a little bit and do a show after and do the women's show tomorrow. So something came up on Twitter today where people are making predictions over the next 4 games for Arsenal. Um, and the next 4 games are Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, Leicester, and Watford. The only game that's away is Leicester. And so people are making predictions, and I'm kind of looking at those 4 games, and it's not that I don't rate us, or I think that we're a horrible team or whatever, but I just felt like, based on a couple of different factors, what I could definitely see happening is anything between 5 and 7 out of 12. And 5 being worst case scenario and 7 being probably the most realistic. I would say 9 points is would be for me overachieving right now for Arsenal, and what I've seen. Um, and of course, I got a lot of stick, and I'm not surprised at that. I think after you play 4 games and you're riding a high, after winning 3 on the bounce and then drawing a tough game at the Amex against Brighton, you would expect to just kind of continue on that form. Um, but I personally feel like I've seen something different from this Arsenal team that some other people may not be seeing. And there are also some underlying statistics and realities that I feel like people may not know about or have neglected to take into consideration when we're talking about the next 4 games and what Arsenal looks like. Get it going into another kind of tough fixtures, and that's the funny thing about it too, is I feel like there's a lot of people looking at these next 4 fixtures of, Leicester, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and Watford, and think that this isn't tough fixtures. And I think for this Arsenal team, these are tough fixtures, and you could see any of those 4 games going any way. Um, this is not Arsenal of old, where we were expected to batter these teams. Like, that's not this team. This team is really inconsistent. And so to get the type of pushback I got for, I feel like, what's a very realistic, expectation for this current Arsenal team, I was like, let's talk about it. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's see who's in the chat box. Alfred Miyake says 1 game at a time. Evening, Jess. Dave FC says, I missed the Q&A. I know. If you have any questions towards the end, I will answer them. G Kasi, big up, Jess, working overtime. I see. It's not really, it's still early for me here in California, so plenty of time to work. But so essentially, first, yeah, my predictions are worst case scenario 5 points out of 12. Most realistic is probably 7. And if we were to really overperform, I would say 9. The reason why I think, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking 1 win, 2 draws, and a loss is something I could easily see against this opposition. And if, we could get 2 wins, a draw, and a loss, I still think that that's realistic. And those are kind of the scenarios that I'm looking at based on the opposition and kind of Arsenal at this moment. Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the factors that I looked at. I kind of looked at what our records were against these teams over the last 2 seasons or so. Kind of the form that they're in, the form that we're in. Do I think home advantage is going to play a part? I think it'll play a small one. And also just a big factor that I took into this is the underlying metrics that say that we're still not a very good team in terms of scoring goals, creating chances, and things like that. And that's really important. But so let's just start off with the teams that we're playing. Leicester, The last 3 times that we played them, we beat them 3-1. We lost to them 1-0, and then we drew them 1-1. Villa results, we've lost all 3 games against Villa the last 3 times that we played them. We lost 1-0, 3-0, 1-0. We haven't scored a goal against them. 2 of those games were at home. One of them with none of them with fans, I believe. Palace, we beat them 3-1, and then we drew them the next 2 times. One time 1-1, the next time 0-0. So the results of the last couple of times that we played these teams don't necessarily spell out a sparkling record and teams that we don't tend to really struggle against. These are teams that on any given day we can beat them or they can beat us. I think that that's pretty clear. So I think that kind of debunks the whole these teams are easy and we should just batter them even at home. I just don't believe it's that simple. I know that Leicester is not in good form, but neither were we before we beat Chelsea 3-1, last season. So I think form is something that is kind of important. You have to take that into consideration. But that Leicester team, if they decide to play even, a couple of percentage above what they played in the last couple of weeks, I still think that they could cause us some trouble. Again, this is not an Arsenal team of old. This is this current Arsenal team that for the last 2 seasons has finished 8th place. We have to keep that in focus, because I feel like that's how we get into these things where we start to think we're going to just beat up on every single team when we haven't even really beat up on the teams that we just got past. You know what I mean? So I don't really see this as an easy run of games. So let's kind of talk about in the last 4 games, what have I seen eye test wise and statistically? I think I'll just start off with from the statistics aspect of it, right? Um, for me, well, okay, before we get into that, let's talk about expectations versus predictions. So the key element to this for me is that when I make a prediction, it's not based on what I expect. So in terms of Arsenal Football Club. So my expectations of Arsenal Football Club based on history and what I know of Arsenal is we beat up on the small teams, we're fighting for trophies, we're at least a top 4 team, we play beautiful football, and we're the Arsenal. I base my predictions on what I know of this particular team. So for me to say that I think that it's very realistic that we could get between 5 and 7 points, and at the best case scenario 9, is not me accepting mediocrity, because what I expect for this club is not the same as what I would predict based on the reality of where we are right now. And there was a lot of confusion and I think just unnecessary projection on the part of some people on Twitter, making it seem like because that's what I feel like we're going to get, that is what I view as acceptable. For this particular team, I feel like we need to lower our expectations. I think we are projecting a lot on a young group of players that up until this point have not shown themselves to be anything other than very, very talented, high upside young players with some aging stars that are inconsistent and have a tough time scoring goals. And that is the reality of this team for me. So when I'm saying that that's what I predict, that doesn't mean that that's what I would accept. You know what I mean? That's not the same as saying, oh my God, we're going to get 5 to 7 points. That's great. No, it's not. But this team, I also have a realistic expectation of how long this project is going to take to be successful, if it is successful in the end. And I don't think we're going to see a complete turnaround from what we saw last season into this season, and we're going to just see so much better. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this though. Let's see. Okay. So what I see statistically. So this is coming from Scott's analytics pod, and I thought that this was very eye-opening and gave me a more balanced view, because eye test versus statistics, you have to kind of merge the two so you get a clear picture of what you saw over the last 4 games. So the most important ones that came out of that is that basically based on Scott's model, we're the 10th best team in the league. That's based on his model, right? Strength of schedule over those last 4 games was 19th hardest in those 4 matches. So the games that we played all together of Norwich, Burnley, Brighton, and Spurs was the 19th hardest schedule. So there was only one other team that had a harder schedule than us, or easier schedule than us. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So those 4 games were very, very easy. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this turnaround. It's not really a turnaround. It was us getting back to a place where we feel more comfortable and we can move forward and get better from there. But it was the 19th hardest schedule, meaning there was only one schedule that was easier than ours. We had 32 shots versus Norwich and still under 3 XG. So that kind of tells you we're taking a lot of shots, but we're not taking great shots. We're 7th for shots outside of the box. So we're pretty high up there in terms of shooting from outside the box. But we've only taken 8 shots inside the box per game. In Arsenal's last season, we were taking 11 shots per game inside the box. So you might be saying like, okay, that's just 3 shots, but that could be the difference between 1 and 2 goals. You know what I mean? So we're kind of behind in terms of what we need to be creating in order to score goals. We have only created 6 big chances this season, none versus Brentford and none versus Brighton. So that's not the Man City game and the Chelsea game where we didn't have this and that, and we're playing against superior teams, champions of Europe, champions of this, blah, blah, blah. No big chances versus Brentford and Brighton. So that's just, I think that shows you just like we're not really outperforming teams the way that I feel like people feel like we are. But that being said, we have to take this in conjunction with what we saw with our eyes. And personally, I felt against Norwich that we were the better team. I did think that they had some chances, but I think we were so wasteful in that game. So I would say that game was good. We came out with the result that we wanted. We were the better team, but we were wasteful. Burnley, I think they had some decent chances where they could have really hurt us. We were really poor on the ball. We were, again, wasteful in the final third. And I would just say that was just okay. It was an okay performance. Against Spurs, we were really, really good. But I also think Spurs were really, really bad. And I also think if we're really, really honest with ourselves, it was a great feeling and a great game. But they could have scored a goal or 2 in that second half the way that we were playing. Harry Kane on another day buries that header. You know what I mean? So I don't think it was necessarily like there was no chance that Spurs were going to get back into that game. I think us sitting off the way that we did, we opened ourselves up to a team that kind of changed the way that they were playing in the second half. And we changed the way that we played, and it gave them something to try to hold on to. That being said, we were the better team. We deserved to win. But let's just be realistic. Spurs were really, really bad. Then we go to the Brighton game. And I think that game is a very good indicator of the inconsistencies between our team. So we go from the highest of high to not being able to pass a 5-yard ball to Brighton. I'm sorry, but the conditions it's not really a factor because Brighton is fine. They played perfectly fine. We were comprehensively outplayed by Brighton and they should have beat us. Do you know what I'm saying? So we underperformed against Brighton massively. We performed well against a really bad Spurs team. We underperformed against Burnley and barely got by them because Ramsdale was really good and Odegaard got a free kick, and we were just good against Norwich. So when you take that with the statistics and you realize that we've only scored 5 goals this season, 3 in one match, one goal from open play outside of that one match, and 1 free kick, we got to hold our horses just a little bit. I do think that we've improved in terms of the quality of players, the profile specificity, meaning that we have some of the right players in the right positions and it's starting to make sense. I think we work harder in terms of when we're in adversity. I do think that teams of old lose to Burnley, teams of old lose to Brighton. So I do think that those are improvements. But in terms of creating chances, sustaining pressure, scoring goals, putting teams that we should be able to show our quality against, being able to put them under pressure, we're not really doing that. And that's not to say that we won't get there, but do I think we're going to get to that level in the next, just because 2 weeks of international break have went by? No, I don't. And do I think that we're playing better opposition in these next 4 games than we did in these last 4? Yes, I do. So that's why my predictions are a little bit more conservative, because underlying metrics and my eye test are telling me that although we have some good players and it looks like we're improving, we have not turned a corner, and we need to be cautious because I don't think that these teams are coming to the Emirates and they're afraid of Arsenal. I don't think they're going to cower. I don't think that we're going to turn around and score more than a goal a game all of a sudden just because 2 weeks of international break went down, right? So, yeah. And so I see in the comments that people are like, okay, you're being negative. And I don't really think that being realistic is being negative. I think being negative is more thinking that we can't win these games. There's a difference between feeling like I think we can win any of these games if we play really well. But do I expect us to? No, because the reality of this team is that they're inconsistent. And I think we're underplaying the quality of Aston Villa, Leicester, and Crystal Palace in particular. I do think we should be able to beat Crystal Palace, but I also think they're a team that we could easily lose to if we're not prepared. We thought we would beat Brighton too. You know what I mean? And we drew them. So we just have to be careful. But I do want to be wrong about this. So I think it's important also to let you guys know that even though I do believe that we're going to get somewhere between 5 and 7 points, 8 if we're really good, or 9 if we're really good, I want to be wrong about this. I want to feel like we've turned the corner. But if I haven't seen it, how can I say that I know that it's going to happen? I make predictions based on what I've seen in the past and like what I've seen before, not on things that I hope are going to happen. I hope that we win all 4 games. I hope that we win 3 games and we come away with 9 points. I hope that we score more goals. But that is so different than when you're predicting something. So I am optimistic about the players. I like them. I think they have bright futures. I think if we get it right, we can be a pretty competitive team and improve over time. But my realistic mind is saying they're not there yet. So why would I make it seem like that? What basically what people are expecting me to say is that we're going to win. We're going to win 3 out of the next 4 games, which would mean that our record would be over the last like 8 games, 6 wins and like 2 draws. I just don't see that. Most really good teams don't even have runs like that, really. So I don't really think that Arsenal are going to be the team to win 6 or 7, out of 8 games and draw one. Like, I just don't see it. I think probability wise and based on the team that we actually are, that it's more likely that we lose at least one of those games, we draw a couple and win one and maybe scrape another win in there. But I can't see it, you guys. And it's not to be negative, it's just to be realistic. I want to be wrong, but I feel like we'll be closer to 5, 6, 7 than 9, 10, 11. Like, you know what I mean? And so going back, a lot of people were kind of throwing the tweet that I put out about Arteta and being wrong about wanting him out back in my face. And that's perfectly fine. I know some people will not be able to connect the dots and are very simplistic in the way that they think. But me thinking that right now this team is not capable of being consistent is completely separate than me wanting to see if Arteta can improve this team over time. when we get to the end of this run, we will have hit that 10-game mark that George was really talking about in terms of being able to actually analyze Arteta and see what we're kind of working with. And so for me, that's what I want to see. He will have had his team with his players for like 8, 9 games or 8 games. So I think that will give us a better idea of where we're at. So those are two things that are completely separate. I don't know why you can't feel like in order just because I want to give Arteta some time so I can see what he can do with his players doesn't mean that I need to make predictions, fake predictions to make it seem like I'm more positive on it than I actually am. Does that make sense? I'm not going to predict we're going to win 3 out of the next 4 games because I really like Arteta, or predict that we're going to lose all 4 games because I want him out. I'm going to be realistic about what I'm seeing, what I'm reading, how I really feel. And I still will want Arteta to get some more time because I just want him to at least get to them 10 games, because we will have played a couple of relegation teams, a couple of the better teams, and a couple of teams in between. He will have had 8 games with his players. He will have had to deal with some adversity, and then we'll be able to say, okay, this is not working or this is working. But it just kind of is what it is. I don't know. I just feel like it's okay to say that I don't think that this team is going to win 3 out of the next 4 games because I feel like it's unlikely. You know what I mean? And that's not negative. It's just how I really feel. And we'll talk about in a second what is turning around, but look like. But let's see what you guys have to say. Yo-Yo says Arsenal's inconsistencies come from Arteta. He must improve more so than the players. He has been humbled too many times to be stubborn in his ideas. MTV Mario says 8 or 9 points is the minimum over the last 33 Premier League games. We have to be winning 1.89 PPG. I'm not seeing the 5 points is realistic thing. I mean, what we need to get, and we're not talking about what we need to get in order to hit our benchmarks. What I'm talking about is what I predict based on what I've seen. 5 points to 7 points for me is realistic for an inconsistent Arsenal team that has not figured out a way to sustain pressure, create chances at volume, and score more than 1 goal a game against opposition that's not completely torn apart. So I think that's where it's coming from. What I expect, and because you're saying 8 to 9 points is the minimum for you. The minimum for me that I would want to see to actually feel like we've turned a corner is 9 points. Do you see what I'm saying? So basically what I'm saying is that over these next 4 games, we would have to be much better than what we were in these last 4 to even think about winning 3 games and maybe even drawing 1. So that's pretty much what I'm saying, is that there's a complete difference between what I would expect from this team in terms of what would be acceptable for what we're trying to do and move forward versus what's a realistic outcome based on the reality of this team. They're still completely different things. Straight Shooter says, speak for yourself. I hope we lose all 4 games so you and the rest of Arteta sexuals will shut the fuck up for once. Well, Straight Shooter, you can just go on out. Like, if you don't like what we're saying, then you can go. First of all, anybody who uses the word Arteta sexual and considers themselves an adult should really look at themselves. That is such a childish way of describing somebody that's probably just a little bit more balanced. Anybody who's an Arsenal fan that wants us to lose games is a loser and is actually not a real fan of Arsenal. So maybe you're in the wrong place. Why are you spending time watching Arsenal related podcasts if you want us to lose every single game? You seem miserable. You might need to just figure out something else to do. But Straight Shooter, I would say you're less of a straight shooter and more of, I'm not even going to say what I'm going to say. I just think maybe you need to figure out what you want to be doing, because you're spending time on an Arsenal related podcast for somebody that you clearly don't like. What does that say about you? You know what I mean? So maybe you want to find something else to do. It's kind of sad. Not going to lie. Tony says opinions can change. I wish people understood that. Saul says, I am really completely sure in the job of our team Arsenal. Um, so let's see. Let me know where that guy is. Tawanda says, tell them. No, I just don't understand why you spend time watching Arsenal related stuff if you think we're all Arteta sexuals and weird stuff like that. I don't even know who uses words like that. That is like a weird word to use. Z Gould says, Jess, you are not negative. I don't see Arsenal getting 6 points in this run, to be honest. You are not scoring enough goals and you're not creating enough. You will win versus Watford, draw versus Leicester, draw versus Palace, and lose versus Villa. I mean, that's how I kind of feel, but I just kind of feel like that is being looked at as something so super negative, but doesn't that feel realistic to you guys? I don't know how it doesn't. Um, let's see. MTV Mario says there is a difference between how many points you think we will win and what is realistic. If you don't think 5 points to 7 points is realistic, then that's perfectly fine. I'm looking at our results versus these teams in the past, underlying metrics that says we're not a very good team attacking wise, underlying metrics that say that we're still giving up big chances, whereas if you don't have Mopai and players at Brighton missing those chances, we probably would still get scored on. Looking at the fact that like home advantage, I don't really think is really going to be like that big of a thing. And this team is really inconsistent. Under Arteta, we've only had one like 5-game stretch where we were really consistent. The rest of the time that he's been manager for the last 20 months, we've been inconsistent. That has been how we've been. So I just don't know how you could. I need to see it first. If we get through these 4 games and we win 3 and lose 1 or draw 1, then we can start talking about different predictions based on facts of things that we've seen and not hopes and dreams based on what we expect from our team in terms of results, like, or we need to make it into Europe. So these are the amount of points that we need. So that's what I'm going to predict. That's not how predictions go. G Cossey says, just you're even being generous. Watford actually score goals. It's yeah. Um, it's I don't know. I don't know, you guys. Tony says, I think we get 7 points. Arteta can't let Vieira punk him, and we will win versus Watford. We'll draw 1 between Villa and Leicester. I think, so, again, somewhere between 5 to 7 points, I think is out of 12. I don't think this run of games is so easy the way some people are making it out to seem. I just don't see it. These teams are not shit. Like, you know what I mean? They're actually good. Like, they're good teams that will give us a hard time. These teams don't have, I would say Aston Villa doesn't have a hard time figuring out how to create chances and score goals. Leicester are in a bad run of form, but they can hurt you if they feel like it. Watford they have players that can hurt you as well. They're just not very good defensively. I do think that that's the game that we should win. And Palace look a different team under Vieira. This is not the one that we played where it was Roy Hodgson's last game. And even that team gave us issues before Martinelli or actually Pepe scored the second goal. So, like, let's keep it real, like, just for 5 seconds. It doesn't mean that we want to lose. It means that we're just keeping it real. Like, you know what I mean? Just for like 1 second. It's fine. Let's see. Ahmed says, what's the point of spending 150 million if we're still going to be dropping points to these inferior sides? And I think the hope is that, and that's the thing, is that's why I think people are getting confused by the optimism over the Odegaards and the Ramsdales and the Ben Whites and Saka and ESR and these players. There is optimism around these players, but the optimism is more about what we think that they can become. And we're projecting that on them now and saying that this team, based on what we believe that they're going to be, can produce these types of results. They're not there yet. They're not there yet. They're not the finished article. Smith Rowe and Saka are still going to miss chances. Odegaard is still going to have up and down games. I think Ramsdale is somebody who has a mistake in him coming around the corner. And I think obviously we still need to back him, and all of that, but he's not going to always get the save. And I think we have to be cognizant of that and remember that these players are still very young. And even though we project them to be something great, which they can be, they're not that yet. The majority of our team is under 23 years old. The players that we're relying upon. And the other players that we have that are a little bit older are unreliable, inconsistent. Talk about your Aubameyangs, your Lacazettes, your Granit Xhakas, your Thomas Parties. These players are inconsistent as well. You have a team full of inconsistent players. And so you're going to get inconsistent results. And I don't know how you see it like as anything but that. Do you know what I mean? Saul says Lacazette, Aubameyang, and Pepe need to score goals. They do, but it's not just about them, though. It's about the way that we play and our inability to get into good scoring positions. I mean, we're 7th place in the league for shots outside of the box. That is not shots outside of the box are the lowest XG chances. So if we're spending most of our time shooting from outside of the box, that makes it kind of like I see Aubameyang shooting a lot outside of the box. Odegaard trying to shoot from outside the box. We know Thomas Partey does it too. So a lot of our chances are kind of coming from that. And I think we're not getting into good goal scoring opportunities. I actually think last season we got into higher XG positions, just not at a frequency that was good enough. Now I think we're getting into better positions more frequently, but the XG is a lot lower. And it's weird. I think offensively we need some work. Clement says, I'm expecting 7 points, 2 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. I see a win over Crystal Palace and Watford, a draw against Leicester, and a draw against Villa. We're struggling to create chances to score. I think that's perfectly fair to say. Again, my low end is 5. My high end, or like what I really expect is probably something between 5 and 7. Hoping really for the 7 if we play well, and 8 if we really, or 9 if we overachieve. Let's see. Tony, do you think as Americans we can stomach a rebuild a little easier? Every American sports club goes up and down between rebuilds, but in football you can usually buy to stay at the top. I think we understand them a little bit more, but I also don't think that they are similar to the ones that you do in America, because here we have relegation and there are things to qualify for. I mean, in American sports, you have playoffs and stuff like that, but it's not really to the extent of a tournament or a cup competition that you can win a lot of money for, get qualification for Champions League, things like that. So when we're looking at a rebuild in America, yeah, it's fine because your team is never going to get relegated. But I think it's difficult for football because not only are we a legacy club, so we're not expected to go through these long rebuilds, it's a different vibe than American rebuilds because there's relegation, there's money at stake, there's pride at stake, qualification for key competitions at stake, and it's just not really the same. So you kind of have to rebuild a lot quicker, and that's not really necessary in American sports. Everybody will get their chance in American sports, like to be at the top at some point. That's not really the case in European football. Yo-Yo says, Arteta can't afford to drop points versus Paddy, Vieira, Dean Smith, and Rodgers. Otherwise, the agendas will. But this is the good part about it, Yo-Yo, is that I don't think, for me, we'll have 11 games to look at, after these next 4 games and see what Arteta is. Like, is he somebody that's improving, or is he stagnant? Is he getting worse? And so if he does drop points, then I would think that we need to be looking for a new manager going into November. I mean, this is pretty much the timeline that we were on. I don't think Arteta should be out of the woods yet. Even though I want to see if he can improve this team, he has 4 more games to show that he can get the team scoring more goals, creating more chances, looking more competitive, more consistent performances. He needs to improve quicker. When he has his players, he should be able to put something together, and it may not be the final product, but I think after 11 games, we'll know what direction we're going in. And so I think it's not even just about the agendas. It's about keeping the club honest. And after these 11 games, if we do come out with 5 points or whatever it looks like, then we can start really pushing, because I think at that point we do need to start looking at another option, because I personally don't think I think it's okay to give somebody time as long as they're meeting their objectives and benchmarks. From this amount of games, what I would like to see is a couple of different things. I would like to see consistent performance levels for pretty much 3 out of those 4 games. So, not what we've seen where it was a good performance, a bad performance, a good performance, and a bad performance. I want to see good performance, good performance, good performance, maybe a little bit of a hiccup here, more consistency. I want to see more chances created. That's what I want to see. I want to see if Arteta can solve that issue of us not being able to create chances and sustain pressure and put, the opposition under some sort of threat. I want to see that as well. Um, I just and I don't want to see him get out coached by these guys as well. And if he is getting out coached, I would like to see him make changes so that we don't drop points. Dean Smith, Brendan Rodgers, Patty V, and whoever Watford have in charge. Is it Ranieri now? Um, if he's the generational manager that he is meant to be, then he should be able to go toe to toe with these guys and get points. This is not Tuchel. This is not Pep. This is not Klopp. I expect a little bit more going into these next 4 games. You have your players. The situation is favorable to you. You have 3 home games. 3 home games. I'm a little bit less optimistic about him being able to pull that out of the bag. But if he does, then we can start having a different conversation about what's the next step for Arteta in his progression. If he doesn't hit this and, he fails to get a decent amount of points from these games, then I mean, we need to have some different conversations. This is why I'm saying we haven't turned a corner yet. Nobody can look at those last 4 games and say we definitely turned a corner. We haven't. We haven't yet. We have to wait and see what he does in these next 4 games. Let's see. Joshua A says, "Who's the dream striker Arsenal need, and who's the most realistic one?" I would say, I don't know. It's still up in the air. I personally would like one of either Dominic Calvert-Lewin or Yusuf El Nasiri from Sevilla. Ivy says, Arsenal's issue used to be converting our chances under Wenger, as we created a lot more. Now we can barely create chances. That is something that Arteta needs to solve. I don't think you can make a huge excuse for not creating chances based on not having personnel anymore. I don't think you can have a midfield of Odegaard, ESR, and Thomas Partey and say that it's okay not to create chances. It's just it reeks now, so you gotten your first 4 games under your belt. You've had some good results and some good results, but not great performances. We need to see that next step. And don't tell me that, 4 games is too little of time. It's not really 4 games. It's everything from probably December of last season to this December. We need to see something different. We need to see some progression. And I don't think that's I don't think we've seen as much as we probably should have, but I'm willing to give him more time with his particular players to see if he can really push that. He needs to become that manager. Yo-Yo says, Gunners remain patient for the rebuild under Wenger. People understandably have anxiety under Arteta, Edu Mertesacker. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I don't think we all need to be calm or whatever. I just feel like making sure that you add context, but you're also keeping yourself honest is important. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, over those first 3 games that there wasn't extenuating circumstances that probably led to us having more poor results than we probably expected. But what I will say is that we can't always throw away the first 3 games and act like they didn't happen. The season has already started and we dropped 9 points right off the bat. And so that's not great. We can say that we like the profiles of players, but we also don't know whether or not it's actually a slam dunk window until 3 or 4 years down the line when they're actually in their prime and they've been here for a while. If we know that we've done a good job. So I understand the anxiety. And if you're not sold on it, I won't try to force you into it because I don't want anybody to force me to feel any type of way. You know what I mean? Let's see. Ahmed says, we can't afford to drop many points to these teams due to the start we had. We need to make up ground ASAP. And that's the thing is we can't afford it. You know what I mean? We can't afford it because of the first 3 games that exist. But does that mean that you make predictions based on what you can't afford to happen? Not really. I think if we get 9 points out of the next 12, that I would say that we're probably turning the corner at that point. We could start looking towards that next phase. Actually, I would say that we're moving in the right direction. And we keep ourselves in a position where we could still maybe make our benchmarks. If we drop all them points, then I'm not sure. Code Rich Slayton says, I actually disagree. Arteta just spent 150 on this team. We can't just sack him now. Well, this is the difficult thing about it, right? Is that I don't think Arsenal can afford to be outside of Europe for another season. Not because we need the money per se, but I think from a perspective of prestige, legacy, and the ability to recruit. And the fact that I don't think Arsenal benefit from being outside of Europe. I really don't. I really, really don't. We don't have the ability to keep some of our fringe players developing, and that's like your Martinellis, your Balligans. We're losing out on things because we don't have those extra games. And I do think it hurts us. And I think that's if we're not on track to make it into the top 6, I do think you have to sack Arteta. And you can kind of see if you're on that track. It's very difficult to make a unique turnaround after December. Very, very unique. There's not a lot of managers that can come in and do a Tuchel because not a lot of managers have that level of quality underperforming for them to work with. No manager can really come in, I think, mid-season for Arsenal if we get to a point where it looks like top 6 is out of reach and really just like it's a touch and go type of thing. I mean, I know some people would rather him stay even if he doesn't get European football, but I do think that if in November it looks like he's falling by the wayside, I do think you need to consider it. I think to a certain extent, the project is built around him and his players and stuff like that. But if it's not working and he's not hitting his benchmarks, which has to be bare minimum Europe, then you have to look at it. But it's very hard mid-season because you kind of have to really bomb. And Arsenal doesn't like to make hard decisions mid-season. So I can see even if he's floundering around between 8th and 10th, him keeping his job. And that's kind of the reason why we're here, to be honest. We need Europe. We really do. And we need to be secure in the top 6 by the end of these games, because after the 10th game, things firm up. We know when the season starts, everything is jumbled up. And right now, based on what happens in these next 4 games, I think it'll determine kind of who's where they are going to be and how much you need to improve in order to get where you want to be at. And I just think that's why these 4 games are so important. After the 10th game, things really do firm up, and we're right about there after these 4 games. Let's see. Tony, 9 points and like 6 or 7 goals would be fantastic. That's what I have written down. Or I didn't write it down. I think I tweeted it out, but something of that to that. 9 points. I would like, so basically, specifically what I would like to see in these next 4 games is a dominant performance over Watford, like never any question whether or not we're going to win the game or not. We're at home. I would expect us to beat them at least 3-0. Comprehensive victory, no goals against. I would like to see us beat Palace. I don't really care how we do it as long as we beat them and score at least 2 goals. And I would like to see us beat one of Villa or Leicester. Don't care what the score line is because I know those ones are a little bit different. But I would like in these at least these 4 games for us to score 6 goals. 6 goals and 9 points would make me feel like we're doing something. But I think we're gonna fall short because based on what I've seen, that would take our performance level would have to really go up. And I haven't seen that from this team yet. You know what I mean? I haven't really seen it. No, I think we should beat Watford 3-0. Why not? Like, I do think we should beat Watford 3-0. I think when we're talking about certain teams, like, because we could have beat Norwich at home 3-0 if we had been more clinical. So why couldn't if we're progressing, I would expect from us to be more clinical in front of goal against Watford than we were against Norwich. Against Norwich, we could have scored 3 goals. So why couldn't we beat Watford 3-0? I think they're about the same level. Watford is a little bit, I think, better than Norwich, but we should be better. You know what I mean? Um, Ify says, don't get me wrong. He has improved the team defensively, but he needs to sort the attacking side of our team. And I don't think it needs to take like an entire another season to see progress in the attack. I think it's something that he's really struggled with. And if we're completely honest, he's had these same players. Well, he's had Pepe and Aubameyang and Lacazette the entire time. He's had ESR and Saka since last December. So he's had quite a bit of time to work with these guys, so I would expect some improvements. I don't expect it to be perfect. I don't expect it to be Liverpool City levels, but I expect it to at least be top 6 levels where we're one of the top 5 to 6 attacks in the league. And it's looking like it. Be honest, you guys, if you use your eye test for a second, have you watched any of our games except for the Spurs match and thought this is a 5th place to 6th, at least top 6 attack in the league? Be real. Like, just be real for like 5 seconds. Let's see. Cole P says Villa, Leicester, and Palace are no mugs, and U's aren't that great. They're not easy teams, and when I'm seeing people, we easily get 9 points against these teams. I think Watford is definitely one that if we don't win, we're in trouble. But I think we should beat Watford. The other 3 are more like those can go any way. And that's why I tend to think that we'll be more inconsistent than consistent. I do think that past results point to the fact that we're not dominant against any of those 3 teams. And our inconsistencies have shown, and we don't score goals. The funny thing about people think that relegation teams go down because they give up a lot of goals. They actually go down because they don't score enough goals. And I think that could be a real issue for us if we don't get it together. Let's see. Code says no. I think that's to the question of, do you think that you've seen from Arsenal a top 5 or top 6 attack when you've watched it? Do you even use your eye test without statistics? Because statistics say we're not. But even with your eye test, do you see that? Or are you projecting that based on what you see on paper? Like, these guys should be able to score that amount of goals. The system is letting them down. I think they're also not clinical in front of goal because they're all inconsistent players except for Aubameyang. Aubameyang is somebody that has always been consistent but has fallen off of some sort of cliff. And I'm not sure if it's his fault or Arteta's system's fault. But what I will say is that the other players in Lacazette, Saka, ESR, and Pepe have always been inconsistent. ESR and Saka mostly due to their inexperience. Pepe because that's just his vibe. Lacazette just because he's not really a top goal scoring type of striker. So when you look at that attack, you don't really see a top 5 out of 6 attack. And so we're going to struggle to score goals. And if you can't score goals, then you can't win games. And yeah, you'll be able to draw games, but you won't be able to beat teams, so, and I don't think we're going to find very many teams that lack that clinical edge that Brighton did the other day. I think, some other teams like Aston Villa might punish you for some of the poor defending that we had. So let's just be a little bit more. It's fine. It's fine. I don't think being real means that you're overtly negative. It's just I don't want to blow smoke, because if I sit here and tell you guys that I think we're going to win 3 games and maybe draw one of the other ones, I am not telling you guys the truth. I'm not telling you guys the truth about how I actually feel. Cole P says, I mean that 3 wins is a push. Watford, yes, probably Leicester, but I don't know about Palace or Villa. They're looking decent. That's what I mean. These are decent teams. Leicester were second best in both games last season. Palace are in a transitional period. Watford are aiming for survival. Dean Smith has Arteta's number. Arteta has no excuses. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we beat Leicester 3-1, and we deserved to win. They were not as good as us. The first game, I do think that it was one of those where, remember last season where we would control a lot of the ball and we would think that we were controlling the game because we had possession. I think last season what people figured out about Arsenal is that we're blunt and we don't score a lot of goals, and we like to have possession. So they allowed us to have possession and then try to hit us on the break. So what I thought was that Brendan Rodgers outcoached Arteta. We fell into the trap. I remember we played Xhaka, Thomas, and Danny Ceballos in a midfield 3, and it was atrocious. And I think we knew that Vardy was going to come in at for the last 30 minutes, and he came on and scored. And so I would say Leicester were the better team in that first game. We outplayed them in the second. Palace, to me, is a team that could easily sneak up on us, and they could get a sneaky draw if we're not ready to play. Again, our record against them in the past hasn't been great. Dean Smith, we haven't beat Aston Villa in the last 3 matches that we played them. We haven't scored a goal either. And when I saw them play against United, I thought, even though this team looks a little bit weaker without Jack Grealish, what they do have is a bunch of sprinty, athletic players that can press you. And guess what? Arsenal don't do well against players that like to press. So I still don't see where these 3 wins are coming from. These 3 easy wins are coming from. I think we have to play at peak to get them 3 wins. And I don't see an inconsistent team playing at peak for 4 games in a row. Let's see. Code says, we got robbed by Craig Pawson against Leicester 1-0, though. The header got disallowed. Yeah, I hear you. Ahmed says, do you think Bruno Guimaraes or Basuma would join us in January? I don't know. Bruno Guimaraes is a player that I really like, and I think he would improve our midfield. I think he's a player that could play in a midfield 3, play at the base, or play as another 8. I think he'd be perfect, but I don't know if we're going to get a midfielder in January. I would hope that we are, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So I think it depends on kind of how we're looking as well. I don't think if we're down in 10th place that we'll be looking at the top end of that spectrum. So we'll see. But I would hope that a midfielder would come in because we're going to need it. LRB Rams says, Arsenal need to watch out for Cash. The Scottish Zidane. Is that supposed to be, who's that? John McGinn. So is that John McGinn? Target, Ings, and Buendia. I mean, that's pretty much their entire team. They're a really dangerous team on their day. And I think the way that they run and press and harass you is something that the Arsenal team that I've seen doesn't like. We like when teams sit off of us. That's why we did so much better in Europe, is because we had an extra second or 2 to really think. And the Premier League teams don't give us that. And if I was any team playing against Arsenal in these next couple of games and I watched Brighton play, I would say, press these guys. They don't like it. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. I think this is going to give us a good indication of where we really are. Tony says, it's crazy. A coach who was a midfielder consistently fails to dominate the midfield. We had an opportunity to switch up the midfield, and I think it's still an issue now. I think if you have a more dominant midfield, you have a more dominant team. The game is won and lost in midfield. And I know that we had to fill those other positions, right back, center back, goalkeeper, backup central midfield, backup left back, and Odegaard. But I still think that the more impactful signing was midfield. And we could have brought in somebody really good. And I think that would have changed the complexion of what we're trying to do. But we didn't do it. And I think it rears its ugly head every single time that we don't get the midfielder. Basically, every time that we don't replace Granit Xhaka, we feel it again. You know, somebody said something. I saw it, but I went away from it. Oh, Seawalder says Arteta's system was in place when Abba was still firing. Arteta's system was in place when Abba was still firing. System was in place. When? When was Aubameyang still firing? When's the last time that he was in good form? The last time I remember him being in decent form was like he scored 10 out of 11 games, I believe, last season, right before the North London derby. And then he fell off of form again. That's the last time I remember him being in form. And he was okay. I think he was pretty good during that spell for sure. I don't know what's going on with Aubameyang, but I almost feel like I don't feel like shitting on him anymore, because I just feel like once Lacazette goes and we get a striker, we won't even be thinking about it anymore. I think Aubameyang is at the point where he's just kind of needing a new challenge or needing to be somewhere else. I don't really think it's him doing anything specific. I just think sometimes players need to move on or just take a different role. And I would like to see a new striker come in. No hard feelings on Aubameyang at all at this point. Goal. Let's see. I'm not saying it's necessarily linked, but his form fell off with the contract. Yeah, I mean, I think you can say that. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. You're saying like when Arteta was the manager before he got the contract. I get what you're saying, but I think at this point with Aubameyang, what I'm saying is that the greater issue here is that we're 2 players away, I think, from having the right balance in the team. And I think Aubameyang, whether he signed that contract and fell off or it's the system or not, I think regardless, I think Aubameyang is somebody that just needs to move on or take a role and sit back a little bit. And so I just think we're in a new season and we need something different. And I'm not sure that even Aubameyang in decent form solves a lot of our issues. So I don't really know what happened, and I don't want to sit here and say he oziled us or whatever. I just think it's time to get a different profile of player in there. Just like striker and midfield are stale. We need a new midfielder that takes over for Xhaka and a new striker that takes over for Aubameyang. I think that changes a lot of things. I really do. Clement says, no, we are playing like a top 15 attack due to not creating chances and not being clinical in front of goal. Yeah, you can't sit here and say that you think our attack is like the top 6, at least top 6 attack. It's just not, so you have to take that in consideration when you're making predictions. Do you not think that Dean Smith is going to have that team aware that we're going to kick it to Tierney and Tierney's going to try to cross it in, or not to kick ESR and Saka's ankles so that they can't, sit between the lines and collect the ball? I mean, we're pretty predictable, and I would think that any decent manager would know how to stop us. And Arteta has a hard time sometimes adjusting when plan A doesn't work. And I just don't think that's waffle. That's like truth. You know what I mean? That's kind of like our reality. Let's see. So yeah. And I'm perfectly okay for if we do get them 9 points or whatever, or we win all 4 games, for people to come back and say, see, that's fine. Because I'd prefer us to win those games. You know what I mean? I'm not a hater or straight shooter who wants us to lose all of our games to prove a point. I personally would prefer us to just win all of our games, of course. Yo-Yo says, how can so many players be in questionable form or underperforming and people want to persist with the manager? Where were you lot under Wenger Unai? When Wenger was going out, I thought we were gonna bring in a better manager than Unai Emery. I was shocked when Unai Emery was named the manager. I thought we were gonna do something smart. And the main 2 choices were Unai Emery, who I never thought was a good option, and Arteta. And, it's interesting. I do think Arsen had an expiration date, but we didn't have a contingency plan for how we were not only gonna stabilize things, but go up. And they didn't like what Arsen was doing, so they made sure that they went in a completely different direction. And it worked against them. And so I get what you're saying, Yo-Yo, but I want to know for sure that I know for sure that it's not going to work out. And right now, I don't think for me it's not completely done. I think what I want to see is these next 4 games and see if with his players he can make something happen. He can prove me wrong and get 9 points out of 12 and have consistent performances. I think after these 4 games, if we end up with less than 6 points, then we're probably like, okay, I know that you've been kind of done with Arteta for a while because you feel like he's the main issue. But Yo-Yo, let me ask you, like, who would you prefer be the manager at this point? Who would be your first choice if Arteta were to go? Do you actually believe that the board are prepared to send Arteta packing? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Tony says, I'm open for Vieira if he has a good season with Palace. Tawanda says Vieira. Cole P says ESR got the only winning goal and man of the match a couple nights ago for the under 21s. Yeah, I mean, all of our players are scoring. They've all, like, a ton of them have scored on international duty. And ESR, like, some quotes had come out from him about how they're working on finishing and being more clinical and being calm in front of goal. And we will know whether or not those things are working once we get back into the swing of things. And I would hope that after the lack of clinical edge that we had against Brighton, Burnley, and Norwich, that we would improve from here. We need to see it. Gasparini, if Arteta gets sacked. What do you guys think of Franks? The Brentford coach. It's interesting. I think he's just like the hot commodity right now because Brentford is doing really well. I remember people wanted Bielsa when Leeds came up and they were like looking really good. I don't really know. I'm still in the camp of like just wanting to see these next 4 games against better opposition. I don't care what you say about Leicester and their form. I don't care what you say about Aston Villa. These teams are much better than the teams that we played in this last round. And if we can't get points against them, yeah, I would expect the club to get looking. Ahmed says, my first choice would be Luis Enrique. Is he leaving Spain for us? He looks like he has that Spain team cooking now. Like, I know that they are a really young team, but I like what I'm saying. I'm not going to lie. They're exciting again. You know what I mean? Yarzabal, Torres, Gavi or whatever his name is. Like, they're so like, they're going to be good, aren't they? Bielsa is too YOLO for me, and I love me some YOLO. Yeah, I know, right? Yo-Yo says, Luis Enrique, Lopetegui, Gasparini, anybody really. Rose, Ten Hag, Gallardo, even Potter, just an attacking manager with actual experience. It's a good little list. I would say out of those, Luis Enrique would be a good one, but I don't think he leaves Spain for us. Lopetegui, not sure. Gasparini is a good choice. I love Marco Rosa. I don't think he's leaving Dortmund anytime soon, though. Ten Hag is an interesting one. I think he fits the philosophy of Arsenal, being able to work with young players and play an attacking style. Gallardo, I'm not sure. And yeah, Potter. I mean, he'll end up at a big club at some point, won't he? But those are good options, aren't they? Yeah. So yeah, you guys, I just wanted to kind of address that a little bit, and I hope it made more sense why I feel like we're not going to get like I really saw like I know that and you're everybody's entitled to their opinion and how they feel, but based on what I've seen, Arsenal's past, the past results, underlying metrics, um, and just reality, I personally feel like something between 5 and 7, maybe 8 is probably what I would go for, in terms of the points that we will get within these next 12, because I don't think these games are easy. And I don't think the team has quite turned a corner just yet. But we'll see. Happy to be wrong. Happy to sit here and get all the slander from all the people, all the Arteta sexuals that are like just waiting there to come get me. I can't believe people actually use that word. It's so horrible. But yeah, let's see. So tomorrow, you guys, for the early show, we're gonna be talking about Pepe. I think it's finally time, for us to have the. It's gonna be 3 shows tomorrow, you guys. Actually, the Pepe debate. We'll talk about Pepe early. He's come to the last 2 years of his contract. I think he's a very interesting player to talk about. So we'll talk about Pepe and give our real opinions on what we think he needs to do this season. Should we give him a new contract? Should Arteta be playing him more? Those types of things. Is he hindered by Arteta's system? Then a little bit later, then we're gonna do the Arsenal women's show, and then at 9:30 p.m. UK time, George and Souls will be here to revisit our predictions. So we'll be revisiting some of the predictions that we did early on in the season, before the season even started. Excuse me. I think I said that I thought Brentford was going to be shit. So we'll be revisiting some of those predictions and laughing about them and just having a good time or whatever. So 3 shows for you guys tomorrow. So make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comment section how much of an Arteta sexual you are. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.